A lot of the clients that I work with sell into large organizations, and very often there's a commercial tender process, also known as an RFP, that they have to go through. Now, with an RFP, you effectively enter a beauty parade. You're invited to put a proposal in, and it will be weighed up against all of the others. And the idea is that everything's fair and everything's equal, and there's no undue influence. So obviously, the standard referral strategies that I teach aren't quite relevant in that process, but I've always believed that strong professional relationships still play a key role in an RFP process and can help you both to be notified about them and to be in a better chance of winning the tender. Andy Woodfield recently guested on my Connected Leadership podcast, and chatting to Andy just before the podcast, it occurred to me that he'd be a good guy to talk to about this very topic. Andy is a partner at PwC, the global consultancy organization, and his primary focus is working with the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, one of the biggest departments of the British government. So obviously, being a huge civil service department, the FCDO will be doing everything by the book, and everything is done by commercial tenders. Now, Andy's known for his strong professional relationships, so I knew that he would be using that ability in the way that he engages with his clients at the FCDO. So I wanted to ask him about that. So Andy, thank you very much for agreeing to do this and having a further conversation with me.
Pleasure.
First thing I want to ask you about is those strong relationships that you're known for and that you build. Now, obviously, within a civil service department like the one that you work with, everything has to be seen to be in absolute integrity, as I'm sure is the case with PwC as well. So how do you manage to build those strong relationships with people who might be nervous about being seen to favour one consultancy firm over another? And how do you manage to do everything within integrity, but build that trust that you really need?
I mean, I think, when you're in a commercial environment where there's a tendering process in place, it's even more important than ever to have strong relationships. And the trick really is to make sure that you are genuinely building those relationships outside of a formal tendering process, so that you're showing your interest and your passion for that organization and your desire to be involved and to add some value on their journey rather than forcing them on yours, outside of any sort of formal tendering. So the idea then is that you've got relationships already when a formal tender comes along, and you should then know that there is a tender coming, and you obviously want to make sure that your name is on there so that you can respond. There's hundreds of situations that I've observed where people just think they're going to get on the list to do a tender, but the organisation, the client, didn't even know about them, or that they had capability or interest in that area, so they didn't get on the list. So they couldn't respond. So you have to warm everything up with a genuine curiosity and desire to help that organisation in some way, with a hope that there will be work and there will be opportunity. In many cases, the relationships that you build may trigger a tendering opportunity that wasn't there before. So you're trying to cultivate this environment where you can be useful and you can help, and to make sure you are preparing yourself for tenders as and when they arrive, or identifying opportunities for new tenders to be created so that you can have an opportunity to bid, to add some value and do some great work.
So the better you know them, the more that you work together and they trust you, the more you're actually going to recognise opportunities and needs that they didn't know existed in the first place. A couple of things that you said there really jump out. Carol Stone, who was the producer of Women's Hour and Any Questions on Radio 4, was once quoted as saying, "Make friends when you can, not when you need them." And that's
absolutely
very much what you're talking about. Not when there's a tender there, but outside, and that's absolutely key. And the other is, giving them what they need. I always say the golden rule of professional relationships is that 90% of your follow-up should be about them and not about you. And so many salespeople just knock on their prospects or clients' doors when they've got something to pitch or when they're looking for something. And it's those interactions outside that time that are key. So in Connected Leadership, I share a relationship chart where I talk about the strategic approach to building relationships and understanding the key relationships you need to make them have the biggest impact. And I talk about three types of strong relationships, three types of people with whom you need a strong relationship within any stakeholder group on any project on which you're working. And they are people who have influence, people who can make introductions for you, and people who can give you insight, information, and ideas. So looking at each of those, how do your relationships with the FCDO help you in those ways? Maybe if you can start with where you gain influence and how you can potentially influence that process.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if you go into this in the book, but what I think is interesting about those three different types of relationship is that they're more dynamic than just being one person, aren't they? So one person can be an influencer on one particular topic at one particular time, but in another moment they might be an influencer on something else, and also may then become, a buyer and more significant decision maker on different topics at different times. So for me, the important thing is to always treat everyone with the utmost respect and curiosity, because when you come across them, you don't know if they're going to be an influencer or a buyer, or you don't really know where they're going to be on any particular topic at any particular time. And in particular with the civil service, they develop great leaders and specialists who are redeployed like that. If you look at the COVID-19 crisis, if you look at Brexit, you look at things like Windrush, major things that have impacted the civil service. Civil servants will be redeployed at will almost overnight to new topics. So those people that you may have considered to be in your influencer bucket actually will suddenly overnight potentially become key buyers. So you have to respect that, and you have to do the work. If you just sit on your hands and wait for the tender to come in, then it's a bit like Russian roulette. You may get it, you may not. But you really need to be out there building all of those relationships. And I would just say that I think all this happens on the fly. It's more dynamic, and one has to really respect the individual and follow them as well, and make sure you keep in touch with them, so that it's not people are very, I think people can smell horse shit, if I can say that, and they know if you're just trying to suck the life out of them for a particular deal. So it's not a good idea to do that. People will remember, and you won't get you might get the first meeting, you won't get the second meeting. So you've got to generally be curious and build those relationships, because people will manifest in those three different stages of relationship in different ways and different times on different topics and for different opportunities.
I think I absolutely agree with everything you say, and I think it's a really key point. Ivan Meisner, who New York Times called the father of modern networking, founded BNI. He is always talking about networking being about farming and not hunting. And people will know if you're hunting straight away. In Connected Leadership, I share the 7 stages of professional relationship, and the first 2 stages are that they recognize you and then they know you. But actually, you need to get to stages 3, 4, 5, 6. They like you, they trust you, they are willing to support you, they advocate for you, and that, with most people, particularly in the type of environment we're referring to, takes time.
Yeah.
And you talked about people moving around between roles, not writing people off because they're not relevant to you now is absolutely key, particularly in an environment like the civil service, where, let's face it, even though jobs for life may not exist anymore. I was a civil servant at the start of my career, and I shocked my colleagues when I resigned, because no one did that. People tend to hang around in the civil service a lot longer, so you never know when you're going to bump up against them again. So I think all of that is absolutely relevant. In the book, I talk about the conflict between a strategic or partnership mindset when it comes to building relationships and a relational mindset when it comes to it. And actually, you can go too far either way. If you're too strategic and you say, right, I want to talk to you because you're relevant to what I'm trying to achieve, but not you because you're not, then you're going to do exactly what you said. You're going to burn a lot of bridges. People won't be there when you need them. They're going to smell you coming from a mile away. If you're too relational and there's a lack of any focus to what you do, then you're going to have gaps in your network, and you're going to lack that influence that I was talking about. You're not going to know who to turn to for the key introductions. You're not going to have the information and insight that you need. So I think it's a balance between the two.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think you have to remember that your job is to try and help them on their journey. So if you keep that, if that's in your mind, then you can, hopefully you are continuing to be helpful and not getting in everybody's way.
And that's it. And also, no one should feel networked. If I can,
I hate that.
And you said, people can smell you a mile off. My golden rule is it's okay to be strategic about your professional relationships. It's okay to know with whom you want to build relationships, where the gaps are, or who you need to ask questions of. And it's okay to ask those questions, but in your day-to-day interactions with those people, you engage in an authentic and human way.
Yeah.
They know that you're doing it for your job. But the fact that you can enjoy each other's company means that you're going to advance through those stages of relationship to trust, support, and advocate. But that has to happen naturally. So the behind the scenes stuff can be strategic, but when we're engaging face to face, we need to be much more natural about it. But going back to the tender, the commercial tender process, for those people who are watching this and thinking, yes, but I hear what you say about I've got to be proactive, but I can't influence it. Everything has to be above board. Everything has to be fair. In what ways can that network help and support you? You talked about letting you know when tenders are coming. You've talked about recognizing opportunities for tenders that hadn't even been considered. In what other ways can those relationships really work in your favor?
I mean, you can stimulate a tender that was never going to happen without you stimulating the idea.
Yeah.
So if you're not out there building those relationships, putting your creativity and curiosity into the organization, tender might not even ever come out because it was actually your idea that created. I mean, it's kind of depressing sometimes that it's your idea and now it's going to have to go through this elaborate commercial tender process, and one of your competitors might well win it when it was your idea in the first place. But you can stimulate that process through your curiosity and your energy that you put into that organization. Also, it's important that through those relationships, you would know that something is coming, because in many formal tendering processes, the tenders are quite big and you may not be able to do it on your own. So you need time to form an alliance. I mean, we're a big firm. We employ like 20,000 people just in the UK, and we've got 120 offices around the world. But we don't do any of our government tenders. Very, very rarely we do them on our own. We always work with small NGOs, with SMEs, with other international partners, and we want to build a network to deliver that tender that is the best people to do the job. And we put our wrapper around it and hold the risk and deliver on outcomes. So you need to know what is really needed beyond just the words of the tender, so that you can form a consortium that really can deliver and then win. But then you have to answer the questions in the tender. You have to conform to that process. But you're doing it with a much bigger knowledge of what they really meant when they wrote whatever they wrote in the tender, as opposed to relying solely on the words in the tender.
So if you've got those strong, trusted relationships with people within that organisation, you're going to know what they're looking for, or you're going to be much closer to what they're looking for in terms of those answers. It's that insight that makes such a difference, and it can give you a competitive advantage.
And also, it might be that they are planning a tender process around a topic that you are familiar with. There may be an opportunity to have, and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and DFID, and as they come together as this new FCDO department, are great at doing early market engagement events. So they'll bring suppliers together before the formal tender to share their ambition for that piece of work and to get views on what they should be doing and what should go into the tender, so that you're actually responding to a tender that is a real piece of work that you can then deliver against. So if you're not out there building those relationships, you don't get invited to the early market engagement, you're not going to be able to contribute and shape up the tender that you then would be able to respond to. So it's really, it's critical. It's critical that you're out there building those relationships.
That's really helpful, Andy. Thank you very much. I think the key message is if you're working in a field where commercial tenders are a core part of it, don't get complacent. Don't just assume that because you're in that field, you'll be invited to tender, that you'll know the information, and that relationships don't count. It's not about networks, because they will help you. They'll support you. It's certainly in advance of the process, at least.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. And I think that people will find that really useful.
A pleasure.